What happens with Vulkan? Why the F-35? And most important,
are there any safeguards in place to ensure that third-party modules remain available and supported in DCS?
I think this is one of the big misperceptions out there, so let me clear this up.
all of these questions and more are answered tonight on our Hip Talk show by Wags himself. It's a show you don't want to miss, so grab your popcorn, apple juice, and enjoy our first talk with ED themselves, right here at How I Play.
Hello virtual pilots, I'm Andre Celesti and welcome to a very special edition of our Hip Talk show. This series is about conversations that matter, speaking directly with the people shaping our go-to combat flight simulators and the future of virtual combat aviation. Since starting this format, we had a chance to talk with many creators and developers across the community. Tonight, however, marks an important milestone. For the first time, we're sitting down with the people behind DCS itself. So buckle up, because today we're setting a new record. I'm very pleased to welcome Matt Wagner from Eagle Dynamics, or WAGS, here to answer some questions. It's a real pleasure to have you with us, as this conversation has been a long time coming, and it feels like a natural step for both our viewers and the channel. We share the same passion for combat flight simulation, and now we finally get to talk about what matters the most, where DCS is today and where it's headed in the future. To start off, for newer viewers and DCS enthusiasts, could you briefly introduce your role at Eagle Dynamics and outline your main responsibilities?
I am the infamous Matt Wagner, otherwise known as WAGS, and I am the senior producer at Eagle Dynamics, where I help manage our different teams, be it engineering, art, and design, to help create DCS World.
Most of us know you already, and I'm happy to finally get the opportunity to place some of our viewers' questions and mine on the spotlight and hopefully get to answer many of the most burning subjects out there. And of course, one of the most wanted and asked about subjects in DCS is the dynamic campaign, as it is one of the most requested features in DCS. How is development progressing, and what exactly were we seeing in the 2026 and beyond video? Is that the new F10 view? And is the interface informational, directive, or something in between?
So what you saw in the 2026 video is a very early version of the client-side UI. So and this will probably change down the road. Right now in our internal debug version, you essentially use the mission editor to create a dynamic campaign. And like I said earlier, initially we will provide pre-made dynamic campaigns, certainly for the Caucasus map in single player. And then later on, we'll make those tools available to all users so they can create their own dynamic campaigns. So anyhow, so once you're in the mission editor in this pre-release version, you can essentially bring up the dynamic campaign creation tool. And then within that, it basically uses a version of the F10 map to create the campaigns. And then from that tool, then you can launch the campaign. And what you saw in that video is the early version of the UI, which you guys probably notice it's heavily based on the style and functionality of the launcher we launched earlier. And so what you were seeing there again is kind of an earlier version of the flow of looking at the air tasking order. You'll see, which flights have been generated based on the conditions of the campaign. And then it lists each of those fragmentation orders out there. And then based on the aircraft you own within DCS, and you can essentially select one of those fragmentation orders and jump into the cockpit and fly that mission as a small part of a much broader campaign effort. So right now, most of the work is revolving a lot around stability. The second, of course, is the UI. There's still a lot more work to do. You guys saw, kind of a bit of where we are right now, but still a lot more to do, particularly, say, on the strategic front, the logistics, and things like that. And a big one, which, I said a lot lately, is AI. And, I think most DCS customers realize that the AI, it's one of the most difficult and one of the bigger areas we still want to improve in DCS. And there's two general big areas. One is what we call the RTS level, or the strategic AI, which basically allows the dynamic campaign to understand, where do you want to move these ground formations? What different production facilities take priority? What order of missions do you want to run the ATO? For example, do you want to do a C2 takedown and then seed? Then you want to move on to OCA and then an interdiction. All that's based within the RTS level AI. And then, of course, there's the tactical level AI about if a formation is down to one aircraft, that one aircraft is smart enough to not die on that hill and, get out of town at that point, or, how it puts together strike packages so it makes sense that you have the sweep, the seed, and the strikes behind it, and it can respond to pop-up threats in a realistic manner. And of course, there's a lot of AI elements on the tactical level that will also benefit DCS in general, outside of just the dynamic campaign. So I think it's those three big areas where most of the work is going on right now with dynamic campaign, stability, UI, and AI.
Wow. Well, when I saw the menu being presented in those dynamic campaign shots, I just wanted to click everything and explore what's hidden behind each tab, finding out more of the functionality. So you definitely inspired some deep questions on how will everything function. Will the dynamic campaign eventually support all maps, and how do you plan to introduce it initially?
I think maybe it caused a little bit of confusion in the video was we made a point of showing dynamic campaign working on multiple maps, not just the Caucasus map. The plan is still that we'll release initially with a Caucasus map in single player, and then later we'll add different map support as well. So that really hasn't changed. What we really wanted to get across was that dynamic campaign is not going to be limited for all time just to say the Caucasus map in single player. What we wanted to do is demonstrate that the core tools are going to allow us to do this in all maps. These other maps may not be available at launch, and that could change because one of the things that happens when you have delays like we've had, we've been able to push some other things up because they've had more time to develop. So it is possible that we'll be able to support more maps at launch, but right now, to be safe, and we'd rather under-promise and over-deliver, is to just guarantee a Caucasus map at launch. But again, that could change.
Well, it makes sense to have a smaller test bed with the entire user base where first impressions and overall functionality can be monitored way more easier than having to deal with multiple maps. So starting small does have its benefits.
And particularly with an initial release, both internally and then once we release it externally, debugging is going to be a very big task of ours. It's already started.
Yeah.
So the more we can kind of narrow all the different permutations down to test, in this case, a map, the easier it's going to be for us to identify the issues, address it, and roll that out into fixes. Whereas if we're trying to do too much at once, say over different maps, it's going to complicate things more and take longer to, get where we want to be for an initial release.
Basically, the dynamic campaign will eventually support all maps. You want to integrate what maps we have in DCS to work with a dynamic campaign. Now,
and it's not just maps, but also eras as well, because, right now we've been focusing on the modern era, even in the internal tests, but there's no reason the system won't work, say, for World War II to Korea and then someday Vietnam. So one of the big things about this dynamic campaign system is for it to be very extensible to go across different eras, different maps, different orders of battles, and so on.
How a dynamic campaign will function in multiplayer, and what level of control will servers admins have during an ongoing campaign?
Well, primarily it's about giving the servers the creation tool to create the dynamic campaigns. Because once the dynamic campaign is created, whether it's single player or multiplayer, it actually operates in a very, very similar manner in that the RTS level AI, like I said before, it's going to generate the fragmentation orders, and then you'll have that list of all the different flights. And whether it's single player or multiplayer, you're essentially just selecting the flight. It really doesn't matter whether it's single player or multiplayer at that point. And then once the mission is running for the servers, it's more about giving them the tools to create the scenarios, kicks off the dynamic campaign.
Bang, you started it.
It's going to run the dynamic campaign.
It's going to run it.
So the one element, which is, we're still defining, is that in addition to, again, say jumping into the cockpit, you also have more strategic control of the dynamic campaign, saying, okay, these are the different POIs that are my objective, and I want to task ground forces to capture these. So one option we're looking at is allowing, say, a multiplayer server to better direct, what are going to be the overall objectives of either side of, are you trying to capture territory? Are you trying to bring down these POIs? So, potentially we could allow the servers to better find what the actual goals of the dynamic campaign are. That's certainly going to be there for the single player. The bigger question is within multiplayer, who actually makes the decisions? And it probably makes the most sense for that to be the servers at this point.
Out of respect, I'm not going to go there and ask you when we can see this first implementation of the dynamic campaign going live in DCS. But since we already know you started building it quite some time ago, I hope we will get to see it sooner rather than later. But I, for one, do understand that quality comes with a lot of time effort.
As much as our customers are looking forward to getting the dynamic campaign out, I can guarantee that we want it to be out 100 times more. Everybody recognizes that there's improvements that can be made to the gameplay of DCS naturally. And we see dynamic campaign as a big part of that. There's certainly other areas where we're looking into right now as well, which I really can't talk about. Improving that gameplay across different elements, anywhere from dynamic campaigns to AI to ATC and so on, are all very important to us right now. Unfortunately, just a lot of these efforts take a long time sometimes.
Vulkan has been confirmed as a major step forward for DCS. When players eventually get their hands on it, what tangible improvements should they expect in terms of performance, stability, and scalability?
So initially, which you said before, I wouldn't expect massive improvements initially. The big things that Vulkan is going to bring us more in the near term is one, to operate the program on more than just Windows. The other big one, of course, which goes into performance, it'll allow us to do things like ray tracing, frame generation for DLSS for later versions, FSR 3 and 4. So basically using those type of tools to allow us to improve the performance there. Those are going to be the big ones initially. And then down the road in conjunction with multi-threading, particularly more on not so much the graphics side, but more on the simulation side, will also allow us to get some good performance improvements. But it's not a case of expecting to see different graphics or all new lighting or things like that. It's not a direct result of that. Now, having performance increases, which should come across because of it, will allow us to do some new things like some improved lighting, spherical earth and things like that. But that's more of a secondary result of having Vulkan, not a direct result of Vulkan, if that makes sense.
Will Vulkan be introduced as an optional renderer alongside DirectX, or is it planned as a full transition?
It will have to be a full implementation. We can't go back and forth between DirectX and Vulkan. It'll have to be one or the other. And we see the future for DCS being under the Vulkan API.
Under Vulkan. Will the switch to Vulkan affect modules? And how are third-party expected to adapt to this change?
So a big part of rolling Vulkan out will be updating existing modules. We also are looking into methods that even if a third-party module can or will not update it, of ways that we can still address that. I really can't go into more detail at this point. But obviously, I think 99% of our third-party partners will be able to update to Vulkan. But for those that can't or won't, we're looking at some solutions.
Well, music to my ears and to our viewers, and personally, I wasn't expecting anything different, but I'm glad to hear where the plans are. Will Vulkan require a reinstall of the entire game, or will it function as an update?
It'll be an update, just a very big update, as you might imagine. Yeah, but also when we roll Vulkan out, it'll be one of the bigger updates for DCS in quite a long time. So I would also expect some new features as part of that at the same time.
Okay, so it will roll out with multiple surprises. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to ask too much.
We'll call them surprises for now.
Okay,
I think a lot of the surprises won't be surprises, based on, I think a lot of folks know what we're working on. But it makes sense for us to kind of roll them all at the same time, rather than piecemeal.
Are there any plans to expand the mission editor with more native functionality, such as localized ambient sounds, altitude-based triggers, more granular AI ground behavior, and better control over taxi, parking, and rearm logic, in order to reduce the need for external scripting?
Yeah, so I think if most folks take a look at the change logs, they'll see we actually do this on a pretty regular basis. I think the larger issue is that most every mission builder or campaign builder has different wants and needs of things they want to see in the mission editor. So, things like the taxi logic and things like that, actually very recently have been worked on, and, going through them as best we can, as fast as we can. It's also important to remember, too, that a lot of the folks that be working on the mission editor are also very much involved in dynamic campaign. So and this is probably going to be something you're going to hear me say a lot, it's about allocation resources of what's going to make the most sense. And it often is the case of having to rob Peter to pay Paul. And right now, dynamic campaign is a very important feature for us. And unfortunately, there may be other elements of DCS that might get pushed back a bit in order to allow us to focus on the dynamic campaign. We have, of course, our wish list on the forum is when, folks have a mission editor feature or a bug they want to see resolved, make sure it's in there. Yeah. And we read most everything, and it's probably in our bug tracking software, which also is for new features. And it's just a matter of having those resources available and how it ranks in a priority list.
And speaking of that, I did see multiple times now on the newsletter or on the patch notes, more precisely, when there's a bug that was found by the community on the bug report, you actually link it there. And that's sometimes really cool. Yeah. I try myself, especially in the comments, sometimes when we get, certain users have some issues, and we do understand there will be issues. It's a huge platform. It's not just a simplified game that you just go in and play. I strongly advise everybody to just go, and we usually link it there so they know where to go and do bug reporting, because I know, not everybody knows about the bug report. They think that if they go on a comment, okay, I'm just going to say that I have some issues here, but issues are from left and right. It can be client side. It can be also something that you already know about. So this is how we find out what's wrong and how we get the data out there so you can actually be able to solve it if it's something new.
And just a couple points. When reporting bugs, the two biggest pieces of advice I would give too is one, read the sticky note about how to make a report. Because if, for example, if a report is made about function X not working correctly, but there's no track file, much less a video for us to replicate it, it doesn't really help us a whole lot. So as much as possible, if customers can follow those reporting guidelines, it helps us help you guys fix those bugs. And the second is, a professional, neutral bug report gets a lot better results than one that's antagonistic and caustic. The last thing I would definitely mention about submitting reports is, particularly if it's with, say, an avionics system or a weapon system, that it not be based on opinion, that it be based on verifiable open source information that is directly linked to. That's also very important.
Yeah.
Because we're really not in a big favor of making big changes to the program just based on an opinion. We're very much evidence-based. And once we can actually have sufficient evidence presented to us, we'll take it a lot more seriously and really dig into it. Good examples with the SPO 15 on the MiG-29.
Yeah.
That we had a lot of really interesting feedback, and based on some of the feedback and some of the references that were provided, it allowed us to revisit it and take a look at some options we recently added, say for launch warnings based on a particular type of radar PRF, which wasn't there before. So we're reading these reports, but again, it's really important to also have some evidence, verifiable evidence that's not restricted to base it on.
So switching to weather and atmosphere, can we expect further evolution of the weather system, such as, real-world weather integration, a more granular control over weather, and time of day in multiplayer environments? That one is one that I'm really curious about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously we had a big push on updated weather, particularly clouds, and obviously the new fog system earlier. But right now, again, going back to allocation resources, those folks are currently on Vulkan. So once we get Vulkan rolled out and we're happy with it, then we can start putting people back onto the weather system. And some of the highlights of that, of course, are going to be, still more improved clouds like towering cumulus clouds, which is something we're still missing. Better turbulence effects is a big one. Really no plans to have real world matching weather between the real world and the game. It's just not something we see as providing a whole lot of gameplay and benefit to something like DCS. I can understand it for something like Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane. It makes perfect sense. But for DCS, it's just probably better to allocate resources elsewhere.
It's just about, when we have servers and things like missions that run in the servers, and we want to have a more dynamic weather pattern that happens, and actually you get more control over it. I think that's something that is.
So that will also certainly improve, because even way back when we have dynamic weather, which is based on pressure cells, so that will continue to evolve with the new weather system as well. So rather than having a single weather condition over the entire map based on the pressure systems within the map, you'll have variable weather depending on where you fly, whether it's cloud cover, wind, gust. Gust is another big one we need to improve as well, of course.
Yeah, I know. It's something that will make even that dynamic campaign even more dynamic because of the weather changes that happen left and right. We already can play with the fog, which I really like the way you introduce the fog, because you can actually set a certain time of day that happens, and then you can dissipate it. Maybe something like that to see for the weather. That will be awesome as well. I'm just putting it out there. For sure, you guys know better what you're going to do with it, but it's something that is it has changed also our experience on our server in development right now. So it's really nice to have tools like this. The new infantry AI animations are a noticeable step forward. How will these units be used going forward, and are there any plans to modernize other units, including manpads and air defense assets?
Right. So right now we're starting with infantry units, basically assault rifles for U.S., Russian, and insurgents. One of the big things that's taken quite a while time is creating all the huge amount of different animations of, say, putting infantry into different helicopters, into different APCs, IFVs, how do they jump over a fence and other obstacles. So that's a big reason why this is taking so long, is just all the different animation permutations and just making it look really good and natural. Once that core is done, then we'll certainly work on to other ones like manpads. We've already started working on a Javelin and RPG units and things like that. So, and of course, there's World War II infantry as well, I forgot to mention. So it will continue to grow. It's just right now we're starting with those rifle units. And again, once that is at a level we're happy with and the customers are happy with, then we'll start using that same technology to add other leg units into DCS.
Because we have seen the new skeletal systems you implemented for these units, as we saw in the Beyond video, you included boarding and dismounting from helicopters and the C-130, even throwing grenades. That was awesome. But since you shared with us that work in progress weapon sights, one could wonder if you plan on giving more control over these infantry units, similar to an FPS like Arma or other titles out there.
Yeah, so initially, of course, they're going to be AI-only units. Eventually, we really want to expand the ground aspect to DCS, whether it's infantry, whether it's inside of a Bradley or an Abrams, what have you. There's other factors that first need to be greatly improved.
Yeah.
The biggest one, of course, is the terrain. Just the level of detail of the terrain, the buildings, the explosions, the vegetation would still need to be substantially better for us to release a DCS level ground simulation with a straight face. It needs to be improved. The other, of course, a big one is the AI of the ground units, which, a big part of that is actually being addressed on the tactical level AI for the dynamic campaign. And then the third big element is the damage modeling. Obviously right now for the ground vehicles, you have, side, top, front, back, armor values and things like that. But you can't say track a vehicle or just take out sensors and see that.
Yeah.
Which is also a big factor why I think there's some misperceptions about the damage modeling, or I should say more about how much damage weapons can do to a ground vehicle, because it's really not very well represented in the physical model. All you can really see this through is a life bar in the F10 map of the damage level of that ground vehicle. So there's a lot to do on the damage modeling of the ground vehicles, which would be a critical aspect, again, for us to do a DCS level ground simulation. It's just not there yet.
What can you tell us about the new navigation mesh technology and how will it improve the AI pathfinding and unit behavior moving forward?
So this, again, another common thing, this is also a direct outgrowth of what we're doing for dynamic campaign right now. Mm-hmm. Because right now it's just, particularly in urban environments, it's just way too easy for AI units to kind of get hung up or do stupid things. So one of the things we've done is create a whole new nav mesh to give the AI much better, more realistic, and much more efficient routing options around the map, particularly around the urban areas. And bridges is another sore point for AI routing. So again, most of this dynamic mesh is focused for dynamic campaign, particularly. And again, this was also have benefits to DCS in general, but allow the AI units to get around the map in a much more realistic manner.
We know you are working on AI in most updates we cover in our videos, but there was a showcase posted about AI synchronization information flight where things look really smooth. How is progress on that, and what can we expect from AI development as we move closer to DCS 2.9?
Mm-hmm. So what you saw earlier was early work on what we call the GFM, the General Flight Model. Sadly, we had a really talented engineer responsible for that, who unfortunately since left the company. So at this point, we're trying to find a good replacement for him to kind of take over that mantle and push that effort forward.
Okay, so basically this is valuable information for me, also for our community, because we have seen it and we know it's possible. It's just a matter of time once again to be able to actually get it implemented.
And it's finding the right engineer too. It's not as easy as some folks might think of just putting a help wanted ad out there and we have multiple applicants for it. Finding someone with those AI skills, who understands the product, that can work well within our team, it's not an easy task. So, and it's not just, for GFM, there's a lot of different elements with DCS that it's a very particular type of engineer or artist that we need that sometimes can be very difficult to find.
How how is the Supercarrier development progressing, and what new control features are planned? Will players be able to switch carrier state between launch and recovery? And how will the new briefing room fit into all of this?
So the big elements we're working on right now. So first, the 1MC messages are actually more or less working in the game right now. We're just kind of debugging a bit of the multiplayer. So hopefully in the next month's update, we'll finally hear Wombat doing the launch and recovery PA announcements on the deck. At the same time, of course, as you mentioned, we're working on the briefing room. This has taken a while. It absolutely has, but mainly because this is an all new technology and gameplay element we've never done in DCS before, which the nice thing is it'll have a lot of possibilities for other implementations in the game. For example, maybe at an air base, you have a briefing room, in Iraq, something like that. We've also had to do a fair amount of work on creating, all the different art for it. See all the different types of pilots, having all the logic for the greenie board and how that's going to work in multiplayer, how the lectern and the briefings is going to work, having the data pad and allowing the player to set their route, their payloads, and so on. So it's been a lot of work, but mainly because it's, again, developing a new technology we really haven't done before. Other big elements, one is we're still adjusting the IFLAWs. So that way you have, better instruction for a good solid 3-wire every time. Right now it's still a bit off. The other, of course, is the landing barrier, which we still plan. That is actually contingent on the new rope physics we're working on. So both the barrier, the ALE 50 tow decoy, a refueling probe, all that is contingent on the new rope physics that we're working on right now. In terms of basically we're referring to as cyclic ops, it's not really possible right now because there's really no way to move the statics around in a realistic way. The best you can really do right now is called an open deck, where you have aircraft parked such that they're not going to interfere on a catapult. Having true no-kidding cyclic ops just is probably really not in the cards right now.
Are there any plans to bring Supercarrier level features to other ships, such as the Tarawa, Forrestal, or even some World War II future carriers?
So I think for obvious reasons, I don't see that happening for the Tarawa. For the Forrestal, it's possible. We'd have to work with Hupler to make that happen. And as you might imagine, both companies are extremely busy right now. Hupler has a very, very full plate. For World War II, yeah, I think that could, quite possibly happen down the road. Obviously first we want to get the PTO assets pack out there and all the carriers and working. But I think if, a lot will depend on how sales goes of the PTO. That is certainly an area that we could look into to make a essentially supercarrier functionality for the World War II carriers as well. But that's, very much still TBD. The other two things with Supercarrier we're still working on, one, of course, is the dynamic deck crew.
Yeah.
So we want to, have them have a little more preservation of life, so to speak, that they will automatically move out of the way if they're about to get run over by a taxiing aircraft, just a much more realistic deck. So that's a big one. And of course, another big one is the ability to go into the hangar decks below. It's a lower priority, because, again, despite what some folks might think, you'd never start in the cockpit inside the hangar deck and then jump on the elevator and go up. You always get into the cockpit up on the roof. But it's still something we want to do at some point. Absolutely.
You previously mentioned a UI revamp including social features like friends list and squadron organizations. Can you expand on where that effort stands as of today?
So as you might imagine, it's going to be based on a very similar UI to what done for the launcher and also what you saw in the 2026 dynamic campaign. But speaking of dynamic campaign, those UI development resources are currently focused on dynamic campaign UI. Once we get that done, then we'll probably start looking at implementing some of those things you mentioned. But first, we have to have those resources freed up. But they're still planned as big updates for DCS, eventually a whole UI refactoring.
You confirm work on a new ATC and communication system. What improvements can players expect in terms of usability, realism, and immersion?
The overall goal, of course, is to make it the most realistic, easy to use comm system as possible. So naturally, what we have right now is a nested menu system, which is incredibly dated and kind of a pain to use, in my opinion. One of the things we've been working on for a while now is an all-new UI system based on what you see in Petrovich and George. But more recently, we're evaluating essentially skipping that and going directly to a voice recognition system. Whereas to me, the best UI is no UI. And if we can put together a voice recognition system with a backup, if you really wanted to, a UI, to us, that's probably the ultimate solution. And that's one of the big things we're looking at right now is, could we potentially do a voice recognition system embedded in DCS that doesn't have the requirement for any kind of cloud connection or anything like that. Everything can be done locally. So that's kind of where we are right now. But it's also important to remember that it's going to be, it is a big effort because it's not just ATC. We can't do ATC in isolation. It would have to be done with all the different radio participants, whether it's ATC, AWACS, flight members, other flights, JTAC, tankers, and so on. All that has to be done. Back to the ATC, one of the big things we have been working on, actually I've been working on, is working with some rather well-known SMEs on putting together the comm flow, a very detailed and incredibly accurate comm flow for U.S. military Air Force comms that whether it's through a UI system or a voice recognition system, it would be, at least in my opinion, the most realistic Air Force comms ever done for flight sim on the consumer side.
This sounds really good and definitely will enhance our experience, but please keep in mind that not everyone would like to talk and use their voice in order to navigate the menus.
There will be customers that maybe have a speech impediment, maybe they have a very strong accent, or they just don't want to use voice recognition. So it would have to be something in parallel. We can't go, I think, 100% voice recognition. There'd have to be a backup for folks that either don't want to or can't.
Speaking of, this new communication system may cause some headaches. How will these changes coexist with existing campaigns, missions, and heavily scripted multiplayer servers?
Yeah, so certainly any new comm system would have to be backwards compatible with older missions and campaigns. And a lot of those, as I'm sure you're aware, rely on the F10 other command system. So what we do is we essentially fold that F10 map other system directly into the new UI for the new comm system. So it won't be rocket science. It's certainly something we can do.
Super. Yeah. Ooh, our guy Tobias is like, what happens to my menu? I was like, it's
should be fine.
It's in Edie's hands now. We are tormenting him since you placed those newsletters down there, and we were like, okay, it's the end of your ATC, but it makes sense. It makes sense that it's not, and functionality will continue. We only evolve, we don't go backwards, so it makes sense.
Well, and that's the thing too, is I understand that when we add new stuff, it may break some things. We have to balance that with moving the product forward and addressing all the things that a lot of the customers want. So there's never a perfect solution where we can make everything 100% compatible as we make changes in the game, whether it's a campaign or a mod or what have you. As much as possible, we'll try to minimize it, but at the same time, the product has to move forward.
With so many systems evolving, what steps is Eagle Dynamics taking to ensure mod support and community-created content continues to thrive?
So it's a difficult one too, which you kind of just talked about, that we have to keep the product moving forward. And as much as we'd like to support mods as much as we can't, unfortunately, hold the product back from where it needs to be in order to maintain that compatibility. The best we can do is that when we have a mod that really makes sense, is really high quality, particularly for like a mod aircraft, that developer reach out to us and we can discuss actually making an official product that allows us to much better support it and to maintain that support within DCS. Mods outside of an official one, it's a very difficult aspects for us to support while still maintaining DCS and moving that forward. And I'm sure some of the modders are not going to like hearing this, but in the end, a lot of that's just going to have to rely on the modder's shoulder that as DCS evolves, that they're going to have to update their mods for that. We really can't do a whole lot of backwards compatibility for unofficial mods that we have zero control over.
And then we have seen in the past that you actually took modders even in assets.
Absolutely.
Like Current Hill. And,
the C-130 is a great example too. That started as a free mod, and now look what we have.
Development of the world map has been paused. Can you explain why and what challenges need to be resolved before it moves forward again?
Well, back to the refrain again, just those resources had to be put elsewhere. In this case, I believe it's Vulkan again. We'll come back to it. It's still something very much planned. And we think one of the key new elements of DCS in the future, along with Dynamic Campaign, it's just right now, Dynamic Campaign, Vulkan are higher priority for us.
Which makes sense. But in your vision, in Eagle Dynamics' vision, how would a world map function in DCS? Would it use lower details regions that transition into higher details maps? And is there potential for even the stitching of the existing maps together? This is something that I keep on seeing on the comments from our viewers, so that's why I placed it in here.
So stitching of existing maps, that's a big negative. In terms of spherical Earth map, basically will cover probably around 85 to 90% of the entire Earth at a lower level detail. And then what you could do is you could essentially then purchase a highly detailed regional map, kind of like what we have right now, that then plugs into that. So for example, if we look at an example of the maps we have right now, say you could have the Cold War Germany map and the Nevada map, and that would allow you to take off from Nevada and then fly, across the United States, the Atlantic Ocean into Germany as a single mission. Now, obviously, the space between a Nevada map and a Germany map is going to be at a much lower detail. But this also then gives map third parties an avenue to create maps to support spherical Earth as well, which of course they already have a big head start on with all the different assets and the know-how. Unfortunately, the old maps are built on an older TDK and a very different technology. So we can't port existing maps, at least right now, into a spherical Earth. Maybe in the future, but for now, they'd have to be probably unique maps again.
So just to make sure I got it correctly, especially even later on as we report on this, is basically new maps will need to be created at a certain level of detail to be able to be implemented inside of a world map or not. Because you said that they...
pretty much. I think the bigger question is whether or not the existing maps could be modified to work within spherical Earth, or they'd have to be 100% created from scratch. And I don't believe we actually have a clear answer on that right now because, again, there's too many unknowns at this point.
So the vision is there. That's the vision. That's the plan. And then you'll go on and see how things will happen once you get to implement this and test these things. I think it's also about testing once Vulkan is in and while it's all...
it's a huge...
Okay.
A lot of testing.
So it makes sense, I know what to talk about. I know how to go through it, because it is definitely, when we first heard about the world map, it was, okay, DCS getting a world map. Makes sense, but at the same time, how?
Right.
So the how is quite big here.
I would just think of the spherical Earth map as the canvas.
Yeah.
And then you can paint in high detail areas based on individual map purchases.
Sounds cool. I just hope I don't get more gray hair by the time you manage to. It's it can't happen. Okay, cool.
I hear you. I know.
In the 2026 and beyond video, we noticed what looked like environmental destruction, possibly a falling tree. Is terrain destruction or defoliation something that you're actively exploring right now?
Yeah. So that video segment is 100% correct. We are modeling trees that can actually be knocked down, not just sway and they go right back up. So it's important, for, canopy destruction and just a more interactive world. Right now, we're really not working on like terrain deformation in terms of vegetation deformation, if that's a term. Yeah, that's certainly something we're working on.
Okay, so basically from a technology standpoint, how far are we from being able to support a Vietnam era environment properly in DCS?
It'll come. I think the big thing is, in addition to the technology of having multiple water planes and things like that, a lot of it's actually honestly going to come down to performance. For us to do a Vietnam map right, it'll have to have a three-tier canopy.
Yeah.
And anyone familiar with the Marianas map, particularly the modern day one, which also has a lot of tree and a lot of objects, one of the common complaints we have is performance. In all likelihood, Vietnam would be even a much, much bigger performance hog than even the Marianas map. So one of the big things for us to first need to resolve to do a Vietnam map would be not just the technology, but of course the performance. And a big part of the performance, of course, again, is going to be what we're doing with multi-threading, eventually what's going to come through Vulkan. So eventually we'll get there. But right now, like these two particular technologies would still need to be resolved before we could do it and do it right. Because, yeah, we could probably do a Vietnam map tomorrow, but like the PADI system would probably not look very good and the performance would be pretty bad. So let's get those resolved and then we can work on that. In the meantime, we are going to finish up the Iraq map and the Afghanistan map, which is our number one priority. And we also have at least 3 other maps that we're looking at that we are quite excited about, that we think customers will be very happy about as well once we're ready to announce those.
Yeah, I'm not going to push you on that one, though we are seeing bits and pieces put there by you, and also the third parties, which is really fun. We like this game, and we're going to play this game in that way. So we're going to go and cover in like what if, and we will see when the surprise is there. We don't want to ruin the surprise. That's something that I don't want to do either myself when I do content. But at the same time, I respect the PR side, because then it has to be. It's still a product. People don't understand. It's still a product, and you can't just go and break all the surprises. It's like exactly like a family work. You don't want to. You want your children to be happy when you prepare a present for them with a surprise. Yeah. So I do understand that. Yep. Okay.
But we're also trying to learn some of our lessons from the past, where we probably announced projects a bit too early.
Too early, yeah.
And then for one reason or another, they got pushed back, and there's a lot of resentment for those delays or talking about them too early. So more these days, we're trying to hold back a bit about when we actually announce a product.
Be more realistic. Be more realistic and giving a bit of time. Yeah, I can respect that. I can definitely respect that. And we definitely have seen. And sometimes I was wondering if certain projects were announced for a locked-in situation, especially when it comes to third parties, to say, hey, we are doing this one, even though it will take a huge amount of time. This is something that the community need to know as well. Certain projects that have been put in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, they need to lock in a public way. So, maybe future third parties that are not even yet signing with you, they're not working on something to come to present to you, knowing that, hey, that one is already locked in. It kind of gives a roadmap for future content when it comes to third parties, but also I think Eagle Dynamics, if not correct.
I think it's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Coming back to maps, very important one. Is there any current effort in trying to reduce the space required for installed maps?
So if we were to do it, so what are you willing to sacrifice is the question. Do you want smaller maps? Do you want maps with less detail? Do you want maps with less texture resolution? what are you willing to give up to make the map's install size smaller?
Smaller, yeah.
Because that's what it would involve.
Yeah, in the end, is a tech limitation of what we can deliver currently with the map making.
Yeah, there's only
there's
only so much you can compress. The big thing we are actively working on is rather than limit players to installing maps on their install drive for DCS, is allowing them to install maps on separate drives, which is something we actually do in our internal version right now. So in many ways, we think that's probably the solution, rather than what we see as making a worse map by making the file sizes smaller. It's just giving customers more freedom about where to save those files.
That will be a life changer. I already use my save games folder on a different drive sometimes, depending on the system that I use. I have it with a link source connection, and it works totally fine. I don't have any issues whatsoever. And I can imagine libraries being something really, really useful when it comes to maps, in particular maps. Because modules themselves are not as huge as maps. It makes sense. No. So definitely that wouldn't be an issue. Yeah, great. Okay, good that we at least we touched on this, and we can put out the information. We heard in the past that you would consider upgrading the free Caucasus map. Is there any current talks about it, and what can you tell us?
We've actually updated the Caucasus map, I think literally 3 times now, mostly texture updates.
Textures.
We also recognize that, because it's free, Caucasus map is probably the most popular map still in DCS to this day.
It is.
Not just because it's free, but it's also, I think, a very interesting map in terms of variation in the topography, the airfield spread. It's just I think a map that lends itself well to DCS. So it's something we certainly want and plan to revisit. How we do that is still not something we're ready to quite talk about yet. Okay. And also the timing, because again, the timing wise, we really need to finish up existing maps before we start talking about new maps. And again, there's other maps as well too that we really want to either revisit or do as well. Caucasus is certainly one of the maps that we intend to revisit again. Exactly how that's going to manifest itself, we'll talk about that at a later point.
And the priority focus, for what I understand, also from the newsletter and also from our talk here today, is Iraq and Afghanistan map. This is what ED is doing right now.
Yeah, so we have 2 map teams, one of which is focused on Iraq, and of course the other is focused on Afghanistan. So for Afghanistan, they're still updating a few of the areas like around Kandahar and some other areas of the map, but the bulk of the work right now is completing the final region, the North region, which, as you saw in the newsletter, will also contain a portion of Turkmenistan that will have Mary 1 or Mary South and Mary North as well. And once that's done, then we can put the Afghan map to bed, with updates, of course, and bug fixes naturally. But it will allow us then to move that map team onto the next map project. For Iraq map, there's still some areas in the northern Iraq we want to flesh out and improve, but the bulk of the work now is on southern Iraq region, which of course is, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and portions of Saudi Arabia. And, of course, the goal on that is to allow players to create ODS and Iraqi freedom scenarios, which it's a bit tough right now to make interesting gameplay outside of coin ops in the current Iraq map. But this is, with the addition of the southern part, it'll really open it up. And then after that, of course, we're looking at expanding off to the east to include portions of Iran, which will allow modeling of the Iran-Iraq war as well.
From my view here, there's a lot of content being posted on Afghanistan by talented creators using official modules, but also like the Little Bird. I won't push it, but a Black Hawk module would come in handy on that map.
We're getting close to the day. Hopefully we can do a Black Hawk. Obviously right now, a lot of our focus is still on the Apache.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I can't pass along that just this week, we actually, for the first time, had the brand new rotor model integrated into the Apache, and it flies so much better now. We think a lot of customers, particularly actual kidding Apache pilots, are going to be pretty happy with it.
So soon, TM, 2 weeks, we're going to get to take the Apache for a spin and have a good time.
Still a few bugs we want to clean up on the rotor model.
Makes sense.
And then naturally it has to go through internal, external testing. And so no time frame, but I can pass along that the new rotor model, which we've been waiting for a couple of years now, is finally actually in our internal testing. And the initial results are very good.
There's a lot of discussions around the term full fidelity. How does Eagle Dynamics define it, and what makes modules like the F-18C and the F-16C full fidelity?
So in DCS, honestly, the easiest way to look at it is just two words: clickable cockpit. For Eagle Dynamics products, anything with a clickable cockpit is considered full fidelity. Anything without it, like Flaming Cliffs, is not. That's the most basic way to look at it. A more detailed way to look at it is, both full fidelity and non-full fidelity generally share an equivalent level of flight model. It's more about with the full fidelity of all the different systems modeling, whether it's the avionics instrumentation, whether it's the sensors, the weapon systems, the radio systems, the environmental systems, the electrical system, hydraulic system, how all of those interact. That's what you have full fidelity. Whereas in non-full fidelity, i.e. like Flaming Cliffs, it's a much more simplified simulation of those aircraft.
And with aircraft like Rafale, Eurofighter, F-35 entering DCS, some players worry.
All full fidelity.
Yeah, they're all
full fidelity.
And the players are worrying about the PvP balance. Now, I know myself the answer to this question, but I would like to hear how you approach this concern of the player base when it comes to PvP.
Well, in balance, we don't do balance. We simulate as realistically as and feasibly as we can. And then it's up essentially to the campaign designer, the mission designer, or the server creator to take those assets and create scenarios that fit the balance that they wish. But it's not our goal to artificially balance out things. And we very much create a sandbox. We're not trying to create a single experience with aircraft that all balance each other like other games might. Again, that's not the goal of what DCS is. I understand that some people want a much more directed, focused simulation, say on a particular time period, for instance. But again, that's not what DCS is about. And being what we are as a sandbox simulation has served us quite well over the years. And at this point, we don't see what the point of trying to fix what ain't broke. Now, one thing, we are looking into provide more realistic, and if you want to use the word more balanced, particularly for single player, is adding more AI units that provide more of a threat to some of the more capable aircraft being added to DCS, whether it's the F-35, the Typhoon, the Rafale, because, right now outside of, say, like, the SA-10 or the SA-15, there's not, something that, has a very lethal threat to those type of aircraft. So we are looking at more modern Russian air defense systems and aircraft, same with Chinese. But again, that's more of a single player aspect of the game we want to expand upon rather than multiplayer PvP.
Yeah, PvE in multiplayer is having a comeback these days, at least from what I've seen, and we are trying to do that as well with our server. It takes a long time to actually get it out, but at the same time, I see a lot of players very excited about it. I'm happy. I'm really happy for this type of experiences to be able to be achieved in DCS overall as a community-driven project, because in the end, that's what it is. Like, we use what you give us, and we try to do it in a way that we go on and have fun. In the end, it's the sandbox experience that you want to achieve with groups like ours. Okay, a very interesting question. We've seen it before. Given the classified nature of modern sensors and avionics, how are radar and sensor system realistically modeled in DCS without doing some, guesswork here and there?
If you know where to look and you have the patience for it, there's actually a surprising amount of information out there. Ideally, of course, flight manuals at a releasable level is the ideal choice. But, for example, which I know often comes up is the F-35, and how can you do that if you don't have a flight manual? First, to dispel silly rumors out there, we're not just, basing it on air shows. That's just absurd. It's more about looking at documentation that is available, whether it's directly from the aircraft manufacturer, more often actually from the subsystem manufacturers. Technical papers from organizations or universities like Georgia Tech is often a great place to find such documentation. So there's a lot of really good and interesting information out there, which you can then reference to defense shows of what they show in terms of what maybe say some of the different pilot vehicle or the PVI interface looks like. So it's kind of a combination of all of those. Again, it's air show. I don't know where people come up with some of this stuff. And surprisingly, like with the F-35, based on that kind of information, there's a mountain more information on an aircraft like that than surprisingly compared to, say, a more modern Russian or even more so Chinese aircraft. And in some ways, honestly, even the other aircraft like a Hornet. So my impression is I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction assumptions about availability of information without actually doing the due diligence to discover what's actually available out there. And again, if you know where to look, there's a surprising amount of information. And, naturally, there's always going to be dead zones of data that's not available. But even then, in those limited areas, you can often look at equivalent systems from equivalent manufacturers that you often use a similar PVI kind of theme, so to speak, that you can then base that system on. So even then, you could probably get pretty close. It won't be exact. But again, like we said many times, with DCS aircraft, we are never looking to have 100% simulation. We're generally looking at maybe 80, 85%. So we understand that a lot of customers do want to have that 100%. But for multiple reasons, whether it's the ROI or diminishing returns, classification, it's never going to happen. Eventually, when we get to that 80, 85%, I think for 99% of the customers, that's great. But of course, there's always going to be, a percentage of customers that, until it is at 100%, they're never going to be happy. But as we learned a long time ago, as I'm sure you can never make everybody 100% happy. The best we can do is focus our resources to make the most people happy as possible.
You mentioned that development on the F-35 and F-15C has been laid back for a while. Can you explain why?
Two big areas. One, of course, which I think we mentioned directly in the newsletters, resources. Just those resources right now are focused on other tasks. So, one of the things we got hit for, particularly over the past year, is spending too much time developing new aircraft and not enough time on core and supporting existing aircraft. So we're spending more time listening to our customers and doing exactly that. The consequence, of course, is new stuff is going to get delayed. You can't have it both ways. So it's a bit interesting that unfortunately now it's gone the other way. And we have some customers complaining, well, you're not doing enough on new aircraft. So yeah, it's a classic case of sometimes you can't win. But okay, all that being said, so with the 35, resources is a big one. We're also, because of the nature of the 35, in particular, the art of being able to do scans and things like that, We're potentially working with another party, and we're still working some of the details out with that, which we believe will result in a much better product as well and a more accurate product.
Wow.
For the Eagle, again, I think we mentioned this. The design work, which is one of my babies, is already done.
Done. Yeah.
Actually, done for a while. The delay on that has actually been the art side. That we want to do a really accurate and beautiful cockpit and external model, which will involve scanning. We very recently finally got permission to get into an F-15C here in the U.S. to actually do that scanning. So once we have that scanning done, then we can actually start building the cockpit and the external model, and then start plugging in the different avionics systems and building that aircraft out.
Superb. Well, looking forward to fly that F-35. It's going to be something interesting, especially now. I think they're just coming here in Finland, but I'm not going to go in that side too. But yeah, I heard about it. So I just saw the first one, getting unveiled. It was really cool. Yeah. Some players ask why more Red 4 aircraft aren't being developed if modern Blue 4 aircraft are possible.
Yeah, it's the data, particularly for the more modern aircraft, say like a MiG-31 or an Su-35. Or a late model MiG-29. There's just not nearly enough data. For older Eastern aircraft, it's then more of a question of interest in sales. That, if we do an aircraft, we want to have high confidence that we're not going to lose money on it. And, we've been doing this for, over 25 years or so. We know what sells and what does not sell. And doing a, say, third generation or a second generation Eastern aircraft, it's going to be a tougher sell. And what we found in the past is that these are generally best left to third parties that most often do a very good job with them anyways. And it frees us up to do other aircraft that we're more suited to do.
Regarding the F-15C full fidelity announcement, this was back from last year. We looked at all the questions that were answered over there, and we learned that the entire external model and cockpit will be rebuilt, of course, to meet the new graphical standards. You also mentioned that the flight model will be based on the Flaming Cliffs version and later to be improved. Is that correct? Can you elaborate on that, or what does that mean?
So we're going to base it on what we have right now in Flaming Cliffs 4, which is already what we consider, quite accurate. But what we'll do is we'll bring on, actually already have one lined up, Eagle pilot SMEs. And based on their feedback, we'll tune and tweak and change as needed to make it even more accurate. But, the basis will be from the Flaming Cliffs Eagle.
Well, it makes sense to start it there and improve on a Flaming Cliffs 2024 flight model. Okay.
And that will also be the last of the Flaming Cliffs as well. So from after Flaming Cliffs 4, everything now will be full fidelity.
Okay, so basically you answer one of my questions. Will there be any more Flaming Cliffs modules?
Negative.
So that's it. That's the package that we have there. That's the step that we have for new players. It will always be there, yes? So we will always be
yeah. We're not removing it by any means. Yeah, it's a good kind of entry-level module for DCS.
And speaking of that, then we got, the A10C210 killer. We have the Black Shark 3. The Su-25 and F-14BU making their way, from what I heard, and you confirm on that. Should we expect more of this type of upgrade variants? Do they work good for DCS? How you planned the previous ones? We could expect more.
Absolutely.
Super.
Actually, I would bet on that. We have certain aircraft in the game that we often have customer wish list items about, please add this weapon, or please add this sensor, or please add, whatever avionics systems. But as much as possible, and partly to control feature creep, we try to keep it to a very specific year and block. Okay. So one of the things we're looking at is doing some additional versions of some existing aircraft, which really aren't tied to a specific date and block, but provide, based on available open source information, some systems and weapons that customers have been asking for. I'll leave it at that.
With the introduction of the C-130J and its new interactive console system, could similar mechanics be extended to helicopters and other transport aircraft that we have in DCS?
Definitely, because we Eagle Dynamics put a lot of work into assisting with that logistics system, and we definitely, based on that investment, we want to capitalize on that for future products as well.
In line with that, I will throw this one, you can answer it or not. Is base construction something that could eventually become part of DCS?
I won't say no, but it's not something we're currently working on or planning in terms of base construction. Yeah. It'd be more a case of, the mission designers being able to create FARPs and things like that, and not actively, building missions while a mission is running. Probably, I'm not going to say never. It's just not in our current planning.
Okay. Are improvements planned for countermeasure systems and missile behavior?
So one of the big things we're working on right now is actually expanding different types of flares and chaff based on the country. So, and they have different properties, and also having different subversions, both combat versions and training versions as well. So by, I think, adding a lot more fidelity and options of the countermeasures you load will hopefully, address a lot of those issues for us. A big part of that too, it's not as much as with countermeasure, but more about the sensors, particularly the radar, how it responds to chaff as well, which we'll continue to tune at the same time.
With the announcements of the flyable Japanese Zero, could we see an AI version sooner as part of the Pacific assets, so we can actually get to, take it down before we get a flyable?
So the current plan is that we'll release the Hellcat and the PTO assets pack at the same time. And of course, already the Mariana's World War II is available for free. And then at a later point after that, then we'll add the A6M5. It'll be there as an AI when the Hellcat and PTO launch.
Okay, yeah.
And then at a later point, then it'll be a flyable aircraft as well. But even the flyable version is already relatively far along.
Wow. So, guys, 2 weeks, Zero. There you go. Something that we could look forward, especially when we fly the Corsair. We will finally be able to take down some Zeros over there. Super.
There you go.
Yeah. What is the current status of the Sky Raider and the licensing situation with Crosstail, if you can tell us anything?
So unfortunately, in December, their license agreement expired. And we, even after a couple of messages, we didn't get any updates about if the project was even in development, where they were, if there was significant advancement from the last report we had, before them over a year ago. And we agreed that we would extend the license agreement pending a review based on an update to be submitted by 31 January. Unfortunately, we never got that report. So at this point, as far as I'm concerned, it's a dead product right now. Badly.
Okay, so no communication still continues, like when it comes to any progress report to you guys. That's sad. I know that's going to be very sad for a lot of members of the community looking for the Sky Raider. I know I interviewed
Echo
19, and he was, of course, on his side very excited about the project. Are there any hopes for the future? Maybe still something we can give this to the community, like saying that maybe the Sky Raider will still become reality later on. At least a bit of hope when it comes to the Sky Raider being developed in DCS, not necessarily by Crosstail, but any other third party or even something that you would look into.
Well, it's not something Eagle Dynamics would do.
Okay.
It's not really something that we're interested in. But if a third party reaches out to us that can demonstrate they could do a quality product and manage it well, then absolutely. I'll be more than happy to discuss that with them. We don't have that at this point, but maybe after this conversation tomorrow, I'll get a couple emails about companies interested in doing just that. It's also important to remember that the bar we have for third-party license agreements is much, much higher than it was in the past. A lot of lessons learned. I'll leave it at that. So even a proposal would have to be provide a lot of proof of capability before we sign any license agreements.
Well, on the closing questions, I did set this one separately over here, and I wanted to make sure, are there any safeguards in place to ensure that third-party modules remain available and supported throughout, of course, the early access, but even after the full release in DCS?
Yeah, and there has been for years. I think this is one of the big misperceptions out there. So let me clear this up. So years ago, when we first started third-party products, in our license agreement, we really didn't have any language of what would happen if a developer could not or would not support their product. So then we essentially went to a version 2 where there was language included that if they could not or would not support their product, it would provide the sources to all of us to continue it. But the problem is that that agreement essentially had no teeth whatsoever. And we kind of got burned by that later, which I won't go into.
Yeah, I understand.
So in order to resolve that, what we did is essentially, let's call it version 3. We put together language that also tied to a third-party escrow. So when a third party delivers a product for early access release, at the same time, they also have to provide all sources to this third-party escrow that sits in the escrow that we can't access and that we'd only have access to, again, if a third party could not or would not support that product. And we've had that in place for years now. The problem is the modules that were signed and licensed before that. And that's what we're kind of running into in a very public way right now.
Yeah.
But and again, it's been maybe 5 or 6 years now that all license agreements signed since then are under that escrow. So if we run into a situation where that product isn't being supported or the third party is liquidated, we can then pull the sources and support that product.
Yeah, so basically you'll have hands-on the products yourself, being able to transition them in the future with all the updates that the DCS will get, basically. Okay, yeah, it was an indirect question out of respect, but also out of necessity for the community. And
no, I'm glad it came up because I think there's a lot of misperceptions about this.
Yeah, it's something that I wondered since all the things happen, and knowing how a business is being run, how things usually stay out of the public side and actually being resolved professionally inside of the companies. Sadly, that wasn't the case, and I'm not going to go too much into it out of respect. I may get some flack over here, but this is the tone that I set on my platform, and the tone is for the community, the ones who are passionate about combat flight sim and DCS, and the ones who want to see it through, not the opposite. Because in the end is we're not having allegiance to Eagle Dynamics or the third party necessarily. We have allegiance to ourselves and our passion for combat flight aviation, as it should be. It's a bit hard throughout the public spectrum since drama happens. It's good to know that there are current levers that Eagle Dynamics have set in place to know that our modules that we buy and we get to enjoy will be able to be fruitful in the coming years, in the future, because it's a product. Because in the end, if you pay for something, eventually, if that thing doesn't exist anymore, it happened in the past with other companies. We have these service-based, we are only reliable on the servers, but the server is closing because the developer or the company, the publisher closed anything in regards. And the game, like if you own the game, but you don't have access to it. Now, is this something that could happen to a product in DCS? Like to never have access to it?
So with the older agreements, we're looking at methods to even then protect customers based on their purchase. I really can't go into a detail right now because it's still very much, you have to keep it a little close to the vest right now. I'll leave it at that. Obviously, again, with more recent license agreements that are under escrow, it's not an issue. It's the older ones. Even then, we're looking at some possible solutions to make those customers whole.
That sounds positive.
I wish I could go into more detail.
No worries.
I just can't at this point.
Thank you.
And as you might imagine too, the elephant in the room, of course, I'm not going to, but we signed a non-disclosure agreement.
You need to
and
keep
we take our legal agreements
Yeah.
very seriously.
Correct.
Wish everybody did. So I just, unfortunately, can't say more than that. There is nothing more in the world I would love to talk about and
I can
give
imagine
my insights than some situations right now. There's a lot I would love to say, but I simply cannot. I wish I could, but legally I cannot.
And that's something that any sane person would understand and respect. And we leave it here. I am thankful for your answer, and I think it helps a lot putting some perspective for our viewers and the DCS community. Looking ahead, how do you personally envision DCS evolving over the next 10 years?
10 years is a long time. Obviously, anything can happen in 10 years. But if I'm looking at my crystal ball, obviously, hopefully, we'll have a very complete dynamic campaign spanning all maps over a spherical Earth, where you could take off in one part of the world and fly to another part of the world, maybe in a strategic bomber or something like that, where you can jump into a world where you have multiple wars happening all around the Earth in a multiplayer environment, and be able to jump into any hotspot in any aircraft that you own, and look at the air tasking order, pick a frag, and fly that mission, and have that little bit of impact on the overall state of the world. I think in the end, that's the ultimate goal.
Goosebumps. It's a beautiful dream. It is a beautiful dream, and it's one of those questions that you get in an interview. Used to get. I don't know if you get them anymore. Where you see yourself in the next 5 years? And I wanted to ask you this because it's such a passionate project for some of us here. We want to know what the people behind it also envision for themselves. That's why I ask for your personal vision for it. It can be that maybe certain things won't be there. And the future is bright, definitely, for combat flight sims and most simulation platforms out there. I see a beautiful future, best back from where we started and where we are today going forward. Okay, and finally, one of the questions to put to rest some of the persistent rumors. Am I working for Eagle Dynamics?
You need to get your last paycheck?
Come on, not you too. Please, Max.
No, you are not working for Eagle Dynamics.
Yeah, it's one of the things that because I'm a very positive person. I live my life with a lot of positivity, and I'm really happy in everything I do. I try to put this in my content as well, but at the same time, try to remain in the middle of even some arguments that are happening left and right. This type of interview has been for a long time. I always wonder when I will be able to speak. Sometimes I was even wondering if I would ever be able to speak with you guys out of the situation that I'm getting called like, hey, he's actually working for Eagle Dynamics, so he's getting paid. We're not getting paid. It's a content creation side, and that's the thing. Very important is that Eagle Dynamics have their own YouTube channel, and Wags, you are at the forefront over there. You're in the center place. And actually, I don't ever think that we'll be able to do, because it's way more complex beyond my knowledge of systems, despite the fact that I do love DCS and I really like to fly these modules. I am not even comparing myself with some of my friends that are flying in DCS with their knowledge of these systems and left and right. But I do learn, thanks to you and thanks to all of the communities out there that form around DCS. So really, thank you so much for the opportunity to clarify that there is no media contract or financial incentive involved in our coverage.
No, and just as, to clarify, one of the reasons we're doing this interview right now is that we consider your channel, as well as like the 3 others I did interviews with, good examples of balanced reporting. And, not everything, your channel or channels is roses. I think you guys will often call spade a spade if there's something amiss going on. Whereas I think there may be other channels out there that will view farm based on negativity and just want to focus on that. So when we do an interview like this, we really want to do it with channels that are not trying to do that and trying to give an open and balanced and honest impression or feedback on a product, the good and the bad, and not just focus on one or the other, because also a channel that's just 100% positive, Pollyanna, is not really going to help us either. It's about that balance. That's one of the things we really look for.
Yeah, there's multiple ways of putting a sad situation out there, or a misfortune, or something that went wrong. You can also put it with positivity out there and actually still deliver the same message. It's a bit hard to understand, and that's why we have Petrovic doing his great job over there, trying to put the downside, the things that are shortcomings, but in a way that is entertaining and as well is not degrading for our relationship, because in the end, I am on the other side. I enjoy the products. I want to see them thrive. I want to see the platform move forward, because we invested passion, and I'm not going to say money, because at the end of the day, we have hobbies. And I know hobbies that can be even more expensive than flight ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about to find out. And that's how it is. So before we wrap up, is there anything you like to add or address that we haven't covered today? I gave you this opportunity now in case there is. Otherwise, let me know.
No, I think the big ones which you talked about was, I really appreciate, all the work you're doing on the site in terms of, keeping our customers up to date, particularly on our weekly updates. I think you do an outstanding job on that. And, again, having that balance that, whether it's through Petrovich or your own, if there's something that you guys are getting annoyed about or negative about, that you'll voice that. But at the same time, when we do something right, you'll call that out as well. Just the balance is very important to me. And you do it in a very professional and kind way, which is also very important, because I think it's, particularly these days with social media, the way it is, it's often not about what you say, but how you say it. And I think that gets lost quite a bit, unfortunately, and can also then lead to, people not wanting to communicate. So, as my friend Mover would say, just don't be a douche. And if people can do that, I think the world will be a lot better place.
Definitely, 100%. And the conversations we have throughout the content and the comments I've seen, and this is one of the reasons why I chose DCS as a platform to cover on the content, is because most people in the community are smart. They can have a very respectful conversation, even if we don't agree on the subject or on the matter.
Absolutely.
And we can have actually good incentive. We can even change our mind on certain subject that maybe I wasn't informed enough, or I didn't have the right information, or I just made a huge mistake. It's normal to make mistakes, as long as you know that was a mistake, and move forward. I get to learn what happens. Same goes for the community, and I really do love and enjoy hanging out with DCS enthusiasts, meeting them from all around the world, which is beautiful. It's a dream come true. And yes, once again, thank you so much for you took your time to speak with me tonight. And it's going to be a long process to get the word out there, but it's going to be a beautiful one once we manage to get this out. So
I think so too.
Our audience, I know, truly appreciates it, and we hope and welcome you back again anytime in the future.
Absolutely. This will certainly not be a first and last. We'll definitely do this again, probably this summer.
So this was our interview with Wags. We stood over 3 hours in a constant conversation that was very fruitful, and I hope it brings some clarity on many subjects out there for DCS World. Of course, be on the lookout for our very own summary of this interview in the coming days. Thank you all for watching until the end, and remember to subscribe and give us a like and hype if you find this video informative. And as always, I'm Andre Celesti, reminding you to fly safe, and I'll see you next time.